Baltimore Sun, December 20th. Bottom line is, the word on the street is HBCUs in Maryland, Bowie, Coppin, Morgan, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, have been getting robbed, not getting the fair share of the pie. Craig Thompson, why were you defending the state of Maryland against black colleges?
Well, the case was not against black colleges. The case was against the state. And there were people who filed a lawsuit on behalf of individuals who were alumni of the HBCUs. One of the big misconceptions about the case was that the HBCUs were themselves the plaintiffs, and they were not. So all the folks who were saying that the state is attacking or putting a case or placing a case against the HBCUs, that just simply wasn't true. Actually, John Greenbaum and Mike Jones filed a suit against the state of Maryland. We were defending the state of Maryland in that case. And the case was a desegregation case. It was based on a 1992 Supreme Court case called U.S. v. Fordyce, which said that all systems of higher education have to eliminate the vestiges of the de jure era of segregation. So in essence, what the case was about was whether or not the system of Maryland was operating a dual system of higher education and a system that separated students based on race. So the plaintiffs were not the HBCUs. That has to be very clear.
But the HBCUs sat on that side with the plaintiffs.
Well, they stood to benefit, but they were not the plaintiffs in the case.
They stood to benefit?
The plaintiffs in the case, they stood to benefit to whatever degree there was any additional funding that was received.
Do they deserve that additional funding?
Let me finish what I'm saying.
Very well.
All right. The plaintiffs in the case were alumni of one of the HBCUs. There weren't any plaintiffs from Coppin or from UMES or from Bowie. And the issue was whether or not the state of Maryland has continued the state of segregation in the state of Maryland, and whether or not there were opportunities for whites and others to attend historically black colleges and universities. That's what the case was about. So any of the articles, and of course the piece that you read was one that was written by the lawyers on the other side. So of course,
in other words, it's biased.
It's an advocacy piece, which is fair, which is very fair. But those are the kind of pieces that people like you and people like others were looking at, and deciding to write the sellout factor and putting stuff on your Facebook page.
I did.
And calling me names.
I just said sellout.
Well, you said a few other things.
I did, but I ain't talking about your mama though.
Well, you knew better than to do that.
Okay.
But if you talk about me, then you talk about my mama. But the issue is whether or not the state of Maryland has eliminated the vestiges of the de jure era segregation. And the argument was that it was, in terms of funding, in terms of programs, in terms of mission.
You think the state of Maryland has corrected the evils of the past?
The question is whether or not, that's not the question. The question is whether or not there are current policies and practices that are traceable to the de jure era of segregation.
Do you think there are?
It's not a remedial case. It's not a reparations case. It never was about that. It wasn't about saying, are the HBCUs equal to College Park or Bowie or UMBC?
The question is the state of Maryland, stop shaking your head. This is not about you. You're not in this interview. You're not in this. Stay out. Don't make me put you out.
Go ahead.
No. Here's the question.
She has an opinion about it,
she's not in this segment. She's in the next segment.
That's absolutely fair.
Okay.
But let me tell you what the case is about.
I want to make sure. See, we don't want to do real fast. We want to make sure.
I don't want to do real fast either, but I also don't want there to be continued discussion about something that the case was not about. And if the case was about one thing, and you're asking me a question, it's not based on what the case was about.
To make sure that I understand.
I thought I've clarified it. That's what the case was about.
Just because you said it, communication is a two-way process.
I totally agree.
The person has to hear it.
I agree.
And they have to process it.
And you read an article by the plaintiffs. Communication is a two-way street.
It is. Learning.
I'll listen to your question.
Learning is as well.
I'm listening to your question.
So this is about whether or not the state of Maryland continues to segregate. Is that right?
In the system of higher education.
In the system of education.
At HBCU.
At HBCU.
Because let me finish what I'm saying. Because the plaintiffs
and you don't think
did not say. Let me finish what I'm saying. The plaintiffs did not say.
Step outside. You step out.
The plaintiffs did not say that there was any segregation or discrimination at the traditionally white institutions. So there was not an argument, for example, that there was continued segregation at College Park, at UMBC, at Towson, at St. Mary's, at Frostburg, or Salisbury.
You don't think there's segregation?
Let me finish what I said.
Okay.
That was not the argument that the plaintiffs have made. In fact, they said that was not an issue at the so-called traditionally white institutions, but that there was a dual system of higher education that only impacted the HBCUs, and that there were state policies and practices that maintain a segregative effect at HBCUs, and that because of state funding and because of state program policy, that the HBCUs were unable to attract whites and other students who were not black. That's what the case was about.
So it wasn't about whether or not Thompson has a program that used to be at Morgan or a program that's at Morgan, and the white students that would have went to Morgan are now going to Thompson. It was not about that.
That was part of the case.
Help me understand how, because you could have chosen not to take the case, right?
Sure.
And you knew there was going to be backlash in the black community.
I did.
Particularly since a lot of people happen to know you from.
It's funny because I tell you,
you can't cut me off, and I can't cut you off.
But what I didn't think, which I thought was interesting, because I called you and sent you a text.
Some chicanery here.
No. I sent you a text message when Doug Ganser called me about the case. And I told you about the case, and I told you I was taking the case.
Okay,
and I said before you decide to write on it,
I get a lot
make
of
sure
stuff.
You call me to find out what the case is about.
Craig, that had
Next
been
thing
months,
I know, I'm getting emails.
That had been
phone calls.
That had been months prior, and since then I've been
I didn't know
dealing
your
with.
memory is that bad. I apologize.
It's not that the memory's bad. Like you, I have a litany of issues on my desk,
which is fine. You remember the call now, right? Don't you?
Okay.
But you know what? I'm not going to cut you off anymore. I will answer.
So
your
you do
questions.
recognize that you have crossed the line. Okay, we're trying to get some clarification. You could have chosen not to take this case.
That's correct.
But you chose to anyway.
That's correct.
Why?
Because it was a good case. The state has a good defense. The law was on the state side. The facts were on the state side.
How about this?
And you're talking about not cutting people off.
Touche.
And so when the case, and another important part of that, Donnie, is that there are black students at the traditionally white institutions as well. And so to the extent that those students' rights, those students' abilities to learn may be impacted by this case, it was a very important case, not only for the HBCUs, but for the whole system.
Mm-hmm. What should the lawsuit have been?
Well, that's not my decision. I mean, as a defense attorney, I don't determine what a lawsuit is about.
No, this is Craig Thompson, the community guy, the guy that we were talking about pushing for mayor about 6-7 years ago, mayor of Baltimore.
Well, I'll tell you where the true inequities lie. The true inequities lie in the K-12 system. In the K-12 system, when you talk about where people live and where people are zoned to go to school based on where they live, the economics, and the continued reports that are coming out, for example, about the increasing number of black males who are being punished at inordinate rates, the food that's not equal, the education system that's not equal, the number of teachers who aren't certified, so that by the time they get to college, you have a number of unfortunately African American and other poor students who are unable to compete at the level in college. I mean, if we're talking about where a lawsuit should be, in my opinion, if there's any talk about any constitutional violations, it's in the K-12 system. Now, I'm not suggesting that a lawsuit should be filed, but that's where the true inequities lie.
Do you think it's fair for a black man in this country?
To what? Do I think it's fair for black men generally?
Do you think life is fair for a black man in this country?
No. I mean, that's a pretty, Friday night, at the barbershop question.
Check this out. Black people make up 12 to 15% of this country, right?
Correct.
Black man, black woman, black boy, black girl. We make up 12 to 15%. Black men alone comprise over 40% of America's prison population. Do you have a problem with that?
I have a big problem with that.
You know Doug Gansler. I mean, a lot of people say he's going to be the next governor.
So do you. That picture that you put up and said that I was a sellout was a picture that you took.
At our event, sure was.
At an event that you invited
us to. Well, okay. I'm going to take it as long as you want to give it. You like Stephanie Rawlins Blake, right?
Mm-hmm. We went to law school together.
Mm-hmm. This is the lady that's closing down. My recreation center's closing down. Cecil Kirk, Green Mountain, Oliver, and putting one big super wreck up in Clifton Park. And if you're from Baltimore, you know that when you start traversing different neighborhoods, you're going to get in a fight, generally speaking. But you support that. You support her, generally speaking. A lot of people think she's disconnected from the everyday people in Baltimore, but
yeah. Well, let me just answer your question then, because it's
Doug Gansler's job.
It's a very interesting thing that you're doing, because that's not what we were supposed to be talking about. And so asking
I'm playing to my strengths. You're playing to your strengths. I'm playing to mine.
To ask me, number one, if I like Stephanie, and then to say, so I agree.
Well, what I'm saying, 40% of America.
Let me finish. Now, you've been on this big kick about not cutting somebody off, and then you cut me off every time you ask me a question. There's a big jump from, do you like Stephanie? Yes, I went to law school with her, and then going down a litany of things that you allege she's done, and say, okay, so you agree.
Well, let me throw in the $10 million for the Grand Prix and $300,000 that we need for the recreation centers that are now privatized and you got to pay to go to.
Okay.
I have a problem with that, a fundamental problem.
Okay, a lot of people do, but whether or not I know Stephanie and Stephanie's a good friend of mine is not the same as saying that I agree with everything that's happening. And
but you endorsed her though.
I did, and still do.
That's when my heart stopped, Craig. When I found that out, I mean, the HBCU thing at that point, I was numb. But when I found that out, it was like, oh my God, we're going to hell in a handbasket with gasoline drawers on.
Because Stephanie won?
Because of the policies that are associated with her. In my neighborhood during the campaign, we got 11 new blue light cameras. We have more blue light cameras in 21217 than most any part of the city. They ain't changed nothing. Still sling dope on the avenue every day. Young black man still is the face of illegal drugs in this country, including heroin, crack, and cocaine. But we ain't got no Lear jets. We ain't got no speed boats.
You know what? I would love to see a Doni Glover candidacy. Because it sounds to me like you are really saying that this is not the city that you grew up in.
This is a majority black city, and they will put $10 million on a Grand Prix that happens once a year.
And what do you say every time somebody says, Doni, why don't you run for office?
God called me to be in media.
That's not what you say. That's not what you say. But the bottom line is for you to be so critical, and I appreciate that.
I am. Somebody's got to be.
So you got to step up and do something about it. Just stop talking about it.
You were going to run for mayor first. Why didn't you run?
Well, first of all, that's not what we were talking about. But if you want to talk Baltimore politics, I'm certainly available to do that as well. I mean, I'm not going to run from any issue, but that's not what you asked me to come on about.
Okay.
But if you want to start talking about Stephanie's policies, we can do that.
Not just Stephanie.
As well.
How black people are treated, how we allow people to treat us here in the city of Baltimore, majority black city, there in Prince George's County, the other majority black jurisdiction, supposedly the wealthiest black jurisdiction in the country. It's like we've moved forward, but we've moved eternally backwards. Baltimore City, Prince George's County, 23, 24, at the bottom in a state that touts to have the best public education system in the country. See, the education, the incarceration, it all fits together. It all works together.
See, you and I have no fundamental disagreement on that. And that's where I think the issue lies. We don't disagree on any of those issues. On any of that, we don't disagree. So I'm not sure where the dynamic is.
Over 40% of America's prison population in the most incarcerating nation on earth are black men.
There's nobody in this room that disagrees with that being a problem.
But we keep electing people who are not averting that situation. They are not.
Then run, Doni. Run.
Run for what?
Office. Whatever office you think you can make a change in.
I think I can make a bigger change right here on this radio.
The change hasn't happened yet.
But
You've been on the air for over 15 years.
Actually, since I was 15. That make it 32 years or so.
Then that's even worse. Get up and stand. I mean, do something. Run for office.
Okay, we'll give the callers a